Let's move on real quick. Before we do that, I just want to remind everybody that you guys can go to saltynerdvideo.com and check out our YouTube channel where we have all of our podcasts available for you there in their full-length feature or split up for your listening pleasure. And you can go there, subscribe, like, leave comments, talk to us, let us know what you guys are thinking, and that would be awesome if you could. So just go to saltynerdvideo.com. Takes you straight to our YouTube channel where we have all of our awesome content and thumbnails made by me, which are great. That being said, let's move on to my favorite movie of the list, Timecop. This is the best out of these three. I love it.
It's also his highest grossing movie.
This is the first time I've ever seen it, was for this podcast. I rented it on Amazon. I was like, all right, let's check out Timecop.
I think I did see this one in the theater. This came out in 94. I think I did see this in the theater.
All right, on. Before we get into the weeds like we did last time, Kadish, why don't you set the stage for us? What is Timecop all about?
So in the far distant future of 1997, or 1994, I should say, time travel technology is discovered. And the U.S. government decides to create a police force to keep people from going back in time and messing up the timeline in an effort to basically get rich quick or whatever. So they create this Timecop force, and Jean-Claude Van Damme is a member of this. And at the beginning of the movie, his wife gets brutally murdered by a group of thugs, and his house explodes. And so morally, he refuses to go back in time to save his wife. So he's kind of like haunted by this whole thing, but it also drives him to make sure that no one else can go back and change anything. So he is part of this Timecop force, and he eventually uncovers a conspiracy by a presidential candidate who is using the technology to go back in time to steal money to fund his presidential campaign and also to change public opinion and put him ahead in the polls. And it is revealed as he goes up and butts heads with this politician that this politician was responsible for sending the guys who killed his wife back in 1994. So basically, the movie jumps from 1994 to 2004, and and that in the far future of 2004 is when the movie takes place.
I thought it was like 2030 or something.
No,
10 years.
2004.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
Oh man, I don't know where I got that from.
You said you saw this movie in theaters?
Yeah, I think I did. I don't have like a visceral memory of it, but I'm pretty sure that I saw it in the theater.
Vader, did you see this movie in theaters?
I don't remember. I really don't. I
smoked a lot of weed back then.
No, not 94. That was before that. But 1991 was a blur. But, after that, maybe I just killed too many brain cells. I don't know. But there's a good chance I did see this in the theater. I just don't. It was a long time ago.
Kadish, did you see it in theater?
No, I had to see this on, I think it was either HBO or Showtime.
Okay. When
it came out on paid cable.
So back then, it was there wasn't a 6-week window. It was like now if a movie comes out, let's wait for it to come out on streaming. But
yeah,
back then it was like 6 months or a year or something until it came out on VHS.
So like it went from the theater to paid cable and then to VHS. So you had to wait like a really long time for it to be available. Yeah. And Jean-Claude Van Damme's movies, like for some reason, they were just syndicated out the wazoo, so they were constantly played on TV, and that's how
every young adult watches all his movies.
That's how he got super popular. And I remember when this movie came out, and because I was not a big Jean-Claude Van Damme fan when I was in high school, so like I just didn't care. But like I saw it when it came out on paid cable. I remember watching it and just being like, this is so stupid. and my opinion hasn't changed over the years.
You think it's stupid?
This movie has a lot of things going against it from my point of view. First of all, the time travel logic doesn't make any sense.
None.
And you know how much of a stickler I am.
Yeah, you are a stickler for that.
So the director of this movie, Peter Hyams, he's a guy who I absolutely do not like as a director. He's his own cinematographer, and I think his cinematography is terrible. And he was responsible for making some like pretty crappy movies that I feel like he kind of lucked out in the movies that he made, and so he got like this career that he didn't really deserve. This was a time when I was like even more of a film snob than I am now. So like I would kind of see like his name on a movie and just be like, oh, a Peter Hames movie. This movie's
Stick
gonna
your
suck.
nose up at it.
Yeah, exactly. So him paired with Jean-Claude Van Damme at the time, because I remember like the trailers for this movie always included him like doing that ridiculous split in his boxer shorts. And I thought it looked like he was wearing a diaper. I even told Jude, I was like, oh, that scene where he does the splits in a diaper.
When does he do the split in this movie?
So like
When he's in his apartment
Yeah,
and he's asleep and the guy comes in to kill him with the laser.
Oh, okay.
yeah, and there's a scene where a guy with another huge taser tries to shoot him, and it misses him on the floor and hits a pool of water.
Oh, that's right.
And Jean-Claude Van Damme jumps.
Does the split in the kitchen. Okay, yeah. I remember.
Splits on the kitchen counter.
Classic.
Yeah,
I love it.
And like that scene was all over the trailers.
Like you wouldn't do that if you could every day.
That scene was all over the trailers, and it just bugged me because it looks so stupid. But also, I'm not a Ron Silver fan, and Ron Silver plays the evil politician in this.
Spoiler, jeez.
But I've never really liked him as an actor. I felt like he was always a poor man's Al Pacino.
Huh.
And
That's probably
Now you
Yeah.
you say it.
yeah.
Fairly accurate.
yeah, so like I've never liked anything that he's done. I just don't care for him.
Like whenever Pacino passes on a script, they're like, you know what?
Let's get
What?
that other guy.
Why don't you send it to Ron?
Can we get Ron to do this movie?
See if he likes it.
Pacino's
Ron
passing
Silver's
his
never seen a script before Pacino. I promise you that.
Can you imagine if Pacino was in this movie though?
That would be great.
That'd be dope.
He could play that role perfectly.
Yeah, he could.
But all things being equal,
So you and me, we can't touch the same space. Okay? All right.
Like matter.
Oh, that's right.
yeah. So
Can't occupy the same matter in the same space.
one of the time travel rules in this movie is that like matter can't occupy like space. So like if you were to go back in time and touch yourself,
You would explode.
you'd both like die.
Wait, hold on. So that's something that Back to the Future said too, right? Because he's
No.
like, Marty, you
No.
can't go over there and like hang out with your parents, or you might cause some quantum flux or whatever.
Well, they said one of two things would happen in Back to the Future: either the entire universe would explode, or you just scream and pass out.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be the latter.
Yeah, just scream and pass out.
But yeah, like the time, like that was like the one hard and fast time travel rule in Timecop was like matter can't occupy like space. So like a big concern of the Timecop, department was that someone goes back in time and screws up, such as the past version of themselves, and then the entire universe explodes or something like that. So somehow they know that like matter can't occupy like space, and that's like
Somebody probably did it.
Yeah, somebody did
Yeah.
it, and they.
so like that
For every warning label, there's an idiot who broke the rule.
Yeah.
yeah, but that's like the one rule that they know for a fact, like, okay, you can't do this. But then everything else is just kind of like, well, we're in a sled when we go back in time, but then when we go back in time, we're not in a sled.
That's
Yeah.
the one thing I
Yeah.
noticed.
But then,
and then
when
the travel-
we come back
And you just-
in
In a
that,
sled.
Yeah.
And you just randomly enter the past in some random spot.
Yeah, random. There's no location.
And you already established that you can't go into the future because it hasn't happened yet. But when you go back in time, you're going back into the future. So how does that work? Like there's just a lot of stuff in this movie that doesn't make any freaking sense.
Well, they went back to the 20s, right? And like rigged the stock market. And then
Yeah.
they sent him back.
Great idea.
Yeah, they sent him back in time, but outside the building, and he just fell to his death. And it was like he jumped from
Well,
the stock
that was
market
when they
crash.
executed him. Yeah, they sent him
Yeah.
back to the exact same point.
Yeah.
So why they end up in front of a truck or over the river seems really strange.
That was the one thing that I was like, why are they in a sled? Like it's this big mechanism that they have to get into that like
Well, they wanted a set
shoots
piece.
shoots them into the past, but then when they show up there, they're just like
But
in the middle of
sled
nowhere.
disappears too.
Yeah, the sled does too.
Yeah,
and then when they come back,
They're back in the
They're
sled.
back in
I'm
the
like,
sled.
what's happening to all of these sleds? Where do they go?
They're SpaceX sleds. They use the same one.
oh, I did notice that the self-driving cars, like
Yeah, they're about 20 years ahead of
yeah,
them, right?
I thought that
We
was
don't even have those now, really.
yeah,
Those,
they do. The Teslas
Yeah,
drive
but
themselves.
they're not.
those look like a cross
Okay,
between a
for-
tank and a DeLorean.
yeah, it was. I thought
They were
that was so,
so
funny.
bizarre looking.
Like whatever it was in the 90s, they thought the future was going to be like this, like
Way
industrial
off, guys.
wasteland,
Yeah.
and everything was like they have these like pipes on the outside of this car. I'm like, our Teslas look like
Well,
race cars.
What I mean is we can't go outside and get in our car and go, take me home.
You can now if you
No,
buy a
you
Tesla.
cannot.
Yes, you can.
They're not approved.
No, they are. They're on the road right now.
There are self-driving cars.
Well, I know that.
You can buy a $100,000 Tesla and you can get in drunk as fuck
Well, I'm not doing it.
and say, take me home, and it'll take you home.
Can we talk about Jean-Claude Van Damme's mullet in this movie?
So fun fact about
It was
that.
incredible.
Yeah. So he based his hairdo in this movie on Wolverine.
Oh,
Nice.
Yeah. Like he wanted, I think he was kind of like trying to angle himself to be cast in X-Men, because X-Men was like kind of like going forward in Hollywood at this time.
2000, right? When it came out?
Well, it had been in development for like a really
Look at that
long
thing.
time.
That's a fantastic mullet.
That's an amazing mullet.
perfect.
But
Oh, yeah. I was trying to get a picture of this mullet the whole movie.
But basically, like he looked at this as he's like, this is going to be my audition for Wolverine, because he's a short guy.
I think what he actually said was, "This is going to be my audition for Wolverine."
But they specifically modeled.
Terrible.
That's exactly what he
They
sounds
specifically
like, sir.
modeled his hairdo on
Sorry.
Logan.
There's too much crosstalk. Hold on. Let
Sorry.
Kadish finish.
They specifically modeled his hairdo on Logan from the Wolverine comics.
It was. I think he pulled it off.
Yeah.
Perfectly. And
Solid.
I would have. I mean, if it wasn't for Hugh Jackman being so awesome as Wolverine, I think Jean-Claude would have been
Spot on. Yeah.
perfect for it. I want to talk about this movie because there's a lot of things that I love about it, which I didn't expect to like so much, because I was like, oh, it's another corny like 90s action movie, whatever. It's got freaking Mia Sara Sloane. I did not know that. Naked.
Oh yeah,
Naked.
Okay, so that
Very
little
naked.
the only movie that I've ever seen her in is Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and I've had a crush on her since I was a kid. And then I saw her in this movie, and I was like, oh, this is the best movie ever. Like I forgot that she was even like an actress. I don't know. I watch her in Ferris Bueller, and that's like the only thing I know her
She
from.
only existed in your memory as Ferris Bueller's
Yes.
girlfriend.
And then I saw her in this, and I was like, holy shit! I was so excited.
She's also in a
In
Tom
more
Cruise
ways than
movie.
one.
In more ways than one. And she was great in this movie. I also think that this movie has the best heroes. I think his character, Jean-Claude's character in this movie, is probably the best one out of the three movies that we're talking about so far. I think it's well developed. It's got good motivation. I think I thought it was great.
got
And his
layers.
acting was on point too. I thought it was way better than the other movies.
Well, what's funny about this is that you know how I talked about how I don't like Peter Hyams movies.
Yeah.
As a director, he's not an actor's director, so like he actually didn't work with Jean-Claude on this. So Jean-Claude was basically just playing himself in this movie.
That's why
That's why it came out so good, is because he was just like, well, I'm not going to try to act. I'm just going to be myself.
Yeah.
And in the movies where he does that, he's usually really good.
Yeah. He's charming. He's
Yeah.
a charming dude.
Yeah. I thought this movie was great for his acting career. I thought it was perfect.
They also have like one of the best Jean-Claude set pieces ever, which is like a quintessential warehouse fight scene.
Yes.
Where like he's basically fighting people in this like microchip warehouse in the past, and
It was in the future, wasn't it?
no, it was in the past.
Oh.
It depends on where you are.
So Ron Silver goes back in time to prevent himself from backing out of this technology deal that would have allowed him to keep billions of dollars for his presidential campaign. And so he goes back in time with a group of the most 90s thugs you've ever seen in your life.
Oh, God. The mullets, the trench coats,
The trench coats.
the medallions. It was
Did anybody have a ponytail?
the boots.
They're all wearing
The guy
like,
punching his fist.
they're all wearing sports
Oh,
coats.
God. They were like right out of
Thugs
a,
are awesome.
Yeah,
Right out of
wearing sunglasses.
yeah,
It's thugs out of a comic book.
totally.
Totally.
Yeah.
So like he goes
if
back.
we ever start a band, Comic Book Thugs.
There you go.
That's the band name.
Hashtag.
So he goes back
Copyright.
in time to prevent himself from pulling out of this multi-billion-dollar deal. And while he's there, Jean-Claude Van Damme shows up with his new partner to try to stop them. And basically, this big fight breaks out between Jean-Claude Van Damme and Ron Silver's thugs. And it's the most quintessential 90s action like set piece that I've ever seen. Because it really is like it's in a warehouse with all these like weird like vats and
It's amazing.
and canisters and barrels.
This set has been in 1,000 movies, probably.
Probably.
Batman, RoboCop.
But like because it's a technology manufacturing plant, they have these big like kind of I guess vats of like liquid nitrogen, and at one point Jean-Claude Van Damme kicks a pipe and it hits this guy with just the spray of liquid nitrogen, and half his body gets frozen. and
that was great.
And then Jean-Claude kicks his frozen half of the guy's body, and it shatters, and the guy screams and then falls over the railing to a terrible death by crashing through a bunch of microchip like things in a pool of techno goo.
It was fantastic.
Techno goo.
I thought it was great. That fight scene was awesome.
Yeah.
I have no complaints.
And it's one of those things where like he's hiding behind 2 barrels of flammable liquid that keep getting shot by bullets and leaking onto the floor. And you're just waiting for these things. And he's just hiding behind them like it's nothing. And it's like, dude, bullets
I'm safe back here.
Yeah, bullets are being fired into those barrels. And eventually he pushes one of them off because it's on this like lift, this crane lift.
Of course it is.
Yeah. And he just like casually jumps onto the catwalk off of him.
We need to do a toxic waste themed show.
Oh, there we
someday.
go. Every toxic waste fight,
Yeah.
every industrial fight in a movie.
Right.
I'm down.
But it's also weird that, so like the Ron Silver character, the politician guy.
I liked him. I thought he was a
So
cool
like
villain.
he is the biggest jerk to his past self.
Oh my God.
Hey man, lay off the candy bars, okay?
Yeah.
He punched him in the face, and he's like, if you can't get punched in the face and stick with me, then you don't deserve this job or something like that. Like, you shouldn't be here. I'm like, dude.
Wait, he can't
He's
punch
like-
himself in the face. What are you talking about?
No, remember his assistant.
Oh, his assistant. he
Yeah.
punches
Oh,
in the
you
face.
guys were
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about his like younger
No,
self.
yeah, when he goes back and talks to himself, and he's
Yeah.
so mean to
Yeah,
him.
he's a dick. No, that guy's a total
That's probably
dick.
why he's a dick today. It's
Yeah.
because he did that to himself.
Exactly.
What I noticed about is when he was in the same room with his younger self and his older self, his younger self was always super quiet.
Yeah.
Never really said a whole lot.
Yeah.
So
And also like when he's explaining how like matter can't occupy like space, I'm like, dude, you're really close to your former self.
yeah.
You know, when you're telling him about that, maybe you should back off a little bit. But yeah, like
Calls him an idiot.
Yeah, he has this line where he's like, do me a favor, lay off the candy bars. But like in every other scene that he's in, he's always eating something in the future. It's like, it's so weird.
There was a line from the 1998 Godzilla movie where the mayor had the bag of Hershey Kisses, and he's like, "You leave my candy alone." It just reminded me of that. I
are
don't
you
know
just
why.
bringing that movie up on purpose?
Yes, it's subliminal. We're gonna talk about it one day.
I was tormenting him earlier on Twitter about this stupid movie, and now he's brought it up 3
About
times.
Godzilla.
today.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Or Jurassic Park 4 or 3, technically.
Any of them. Oh, you mean Godzilla
Yeah.
is technically Jurassic? It would be 4, I guess,
Yeah.
because it was 1998. No, 2001 was 3, so it would have been 3, and number 3 would have been 4.
the only thing that would have made that movie better is if Jean-Claude Van Damme played a Ferris Bueller's role.
Matthew Broderick's role.
Broderick.
Yeah.
The only thing that would have made that movie
worm
better
guy.
is if it had not been made.
That's right.
It's a great movie. You guys leave it alone.
It's a really bad movie. I remember watching that in the theater, and when Godzilla's chasing the helicopters,
Yeah.
I was with a bunch of military guys because we were watching it on base where my dad was stationed, and every pilot in the theater was like, "Pull up, pull up." It was
Derailed.
yeah,
It's a fantastic movie.
So anyway, Timecop.
yeah.
Yeah, time out. I got you to talk about Godzilla. I don't know what else to say about this movie. I had a ton of fun watching it as like
It
a
is a
first
fun
time
movie.
viewer.
Yeah.
It's
It is
a
good.
lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's the pinnacle of
The love
Van Damme,
story.
right?
Yeah, it's Van Damme's probably like not only highest grossing movie, it's probably his best movie.
Yeah.
And it's actually based off of a Dark Horse comic book
right? Yeah.
that is nothing like the movie. like they changed a lot for the movie.
Oh man, you imagine the nerds nowadays. It's not accurate to the source
Oh,
material.
Jesus.
Well, it was such an obscure comic to begin with,
Yeah.
and the guys they basically made the comic in order to make the movie.
What?
Yeah, because the guys who created the comic wrote and produced the movie version, and they created the comic, I think, as a way to kind of sell or pitch the idea for the movie, and that's how the movie came to be. But the comic book is about. It's the same character. He goes back in time to the 1930s to stop a guy from robbing a diamond mine. And so he brings the guy back from the diamond mine heist, but there's a robot that the guy brought back with him that stayed in the past and is like killing a bunch of people. So he then has to go back and stop the robot. And that was like the comic book. Had nothing to do with the plot of the movie.
That's pretty funny. Final thoughts on Timecop. Favorite scenes? Vader, go.
I liked it when they occupied the same space and they turned into this gelatinous blob of jello. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, the special effects in this movie are very early 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Early CGI.
Very early CGI.
Yeah, it was cool, though.
Like the traveling back in time effect where they're like kind of going through like
a
the,
bubble,
the
right?
ripples.
The water.
It was very Stargate.
Yeah. Like that was pretty cool, but like all the other special effects were like really weird, like not very well done in my opinion. And there was a part. So a big set piece in this movie is the first time we get to see them actually travel back in time, and it's with Jean-Claude Van Damme and his new partner, and they're in the time sled, right? And the time sled is basically this vehicle that on a track that goes like it reaches 88 miles per hour.
Yeah, pretty much, right?
And then like
And if they don't get the right algorithm, it crashes into a wall, right?
It crashes into a wall.
Yeah.
Because they
That's
can't.
the Vollmer twins.
Yeah, they can't be bothered to have a safe.
Two little dots on the wall.
Yeah, to have a safe like little distance for the sled.
I remember that.
But in that first scene, though, so Jean-Claude Van Damme had been doing a series of commercials in Japan for this gum. It's like this black gum. And so like he was getting paid so much for that he like kind of did like a sly like product placement in this movie where like he takes out this piece of black gum and is like chewing it and then he puts it on like the dashboard of.
Is that what that was for?
I didn't know that, but that's
funny.
funny.
That either. That is funny.
Yeah. So like it was Jean-Claude Van Damme getting paid by chewing some black gum.
What's your favorite scene in this movie, Kadish?
Gosh.
He hates this movie.
Really? I thought it was so much fun. I didn't care.
I mean, I think the thing that sticks out the most in my mind, even though I wouldn't call it my favorite scene, but it's the thing that like when I think of this movie, I think of it, is like the splits in the diaper, but also the rollerblading purse snatcher that Jean-Claude Van Damme stops with his split kick.
Yep.
And he never touches the guy, but he doesn't even turn him in.
No, he just lets him go.
Yeah.
It's got better things to do.
He makes him give the purse back, and then the guy just like skates
And then
away.
that poor lady feels so obligated to say thank you when he gives her her purse back. Did you notice that? She was like, thank you.
Yeah, the lady he just tried to rob.
Yeah.
Like there's so many weird things about this movie that you know if you don't think about it too much, it's not a big deal.
I just watched it and I was like, this is a great movie.
I don't
I was
think
probably drunk. I don't know.
I don't think too hard about any Van Damme movie.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you're not
It's
supposed
important
to.
that you don't.
But the time travel logic in this movie,
Don't even get started.
you know what it reminds me of? Really, it reminds me of Looper. Like you remember that scene where like Jean-Claude Van Damme kicks the past version of Ron Silver in the face, and then the future version of Ron Silver all of a sudden like gets a scar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like Looper was very much the same thing, where like if you did something to the past version of a character, then all of a sudden it would show up on like the future version.
There's
of
the
them.
title.
Looper.
Ryan Johnson's ripped off Time
yeah,
Cop.
Looper was a Ryan Johnson movie, right?
Yeah, it was.
I got in an argument with my
here's-
wife last night about him.
We're not talking about that guy.
I'm just really quick.
No.
Let's hear it.
Just let him talk.
No, go
You
ahead.
can cut it out later.
She saw an advertisement for that stupid movie he came
Knives
out
Out?
with, Knives Out. She goes,
Yeah.
I want to watch that movie. And I'm like, not with me, you don't. Why? Because it's a Ryan Johnson movie. He's forbidden from this house. And she goes, what do you mean forbidden? If I want to watch that movie, I'll watch that movie. Not with me, you won't. And we went around. He went on for like 5 minutes. It was bad. And so,
Here's my nitpick with you just reminded me of it when you said about the scar is that like that shit happens, like the past version got the scar and then the future version had a magic scar. But then like Jean-Claude Van Damme is actually like doing shit that changes the future, and he goes back to the future and has no memory. I know I'm spoiling the ending for you, but he has like no memory of the last 10 years of marriage with his wife and his child, who's now like 9 years old. He's like, what the I've got a kid? Oh, and he's crying and hugging, and I didn't know. It didn't make any kind of sense.
nope.
And that's another thing is like, so like they go back in time to try to stop the timeline from being changed, but it never seems to change until he comes back that one time after the warehouse fight and everything's different, and nobody at the Timecop place who should know that stuff has changed knows stuff has changed.
It's literally their job to know.
Yeah. And they act like, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting so silly, Billy?
What do you mean we're best friends?
Yeah. Like,
I've had your wife's
you guys
chili 100
deal
times.
with
It's goulash.
time travel. Why is there no, like the guy comes back from the past and you don't have a sit down with him about everything that's, here's what it is right now. Has anything changed for you? No? Cool. Nobody has a conversation about it. They all just act like, you're crazy. What do you mean? It's so silly.
I also like how the first time that Jean-Claude Van Damme meets Ron Silver's character, he basically tells him, like, I know you're the main bad guy, and I'm coming for you. And it's like, dude, you could have played that a little bit cooler.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jude, do you have a favorite scene?
I really like the interactions with the wife between young Van Damme and old Van Damme.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, make sure you tell him you're pregnant. And then he comes back and he's like, did you tell him? She's like, well, he wouldn't let me. I'm like, you're talking about the same guy.
My favorite scene is anything with Mia Sara.
You like the sex scene?
Yep.
That was your favorite?
Yep.
Would it have been weird if she had had a sex scene with old and young Van Damme?
A threesome?
That would
Oh, come on.
you kids can't occupy the same space.
Were you huffing rosewater while you were watching that scene, Alex?
No.
That's the name of the title.
She's got
Can't occupy the same space.
she's got more than one space for them to occupy. Don't worry.
Don't cheat.
Yes.
Vader just fist bumped you.
That's awesome. Hey, before you time travel back, I got an idea.
Wow. I always wanted to try this.
And it's not even cheating. That's the Pornhub version.
Oh shit! I'm gonna look for that.
I bet you it's out there. All right.
I did learn one little fun fact while I was doing my Van Damme research. Did you know that he was originally cast to be the Predator in Predator?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
He's a little short for that, though.
He either quit or got fired after like 2 weeks.
No, what happened was...
Of course he knows.
Of course he knows.
Here's what happened.
I was there.
So originally the Predator was going to be a completely different monster, and he was cast as that monster. And then when they decided to change the monster, they needed a bigger guy. So like, they
Somebody who could stand up next to Schwarzenegger and make him look small.
They decided to lay him off. So
That's a bummer.
Yeah, but that was
What did the monster
before he
look
was
like
anybody.
before Predator?
it looked like more of a praying mantis type, like insectoid creature.
Huh. Okay.
Did it do
How
splits?
come we did Van Damme month before Schwarzenegger month?
I don't know.
Because it's Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Oh, okay.
Hashtag Jean-Claude Van Damme.
I thought it was Jean-Claude Van June.
Either one works. But because it's a J. Should
we let the patrons vote?
No, it's done already. The hashtag has been created.
Okay, fine.
No, it's because it matches his name, JCVD, and it's Jean-Claude Van Damme. So
You like September Schwarzenegger?
sure.
Well, I thought we were going to do Seagal.
Seagal September.
Oh, no.
It'll be half and half. We'll split it up.
Fuck that. I can't stand
Seagal
that guy.
Timber.
I don't like him either.
He makes Van Damme movies look like high cinema.
Yeah. His movies are so bad.
Oh,
Fun fact. Did you know that originally Demolition Man was going to be starring Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal?
Oh my God, that would have been amazing.
Wait, who is who?
So this is why it didn't happen. So both Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal refused to play bad guys in their movies.
They do, don't they?
So like the dispute came down to who was going to play
Wesley
the cop
Snipes'
and who was going to play the bad guy. And neither of them could agree on who was going to play the bad guy. And so they both passed on the project, and then it went to Stallone.
Oh, that could have been the most
And Wesley
awesomely
Snipes.
bad movie of all time.
I'm glad we got what we got because Wesley Snipes and
Yeah.
Sylvester Stallone.
It's a hell of a movie.
Well, it's funny because Jean-Claude Van Damme is a
What
huge,
else is funny?
is a huge Stallone fan. Like he idolizes Stallone, and the only time he ever broke his rule to play a bad guy
was for
Expendables 2 solely because the only person who can beat him is Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah.
I
He
need,
did
I
play
need
a
to watch those
badass
movies.
bad guy
Yeah.
though.
Yeah.
He was really good in that movie.
Well, that was he was one of his inspirations for like why he wanted to be in movies. He wanted to be a star like Stallone.
That's all connected. That's awesome.
Yeah, but Timecop is definitely peak Van Damme.
Yeah. I loved it.
I don't know.
Great time.
Cyborg's pretty high up there.
A lot of
Yeah.
people, I had that. Okay, this happens every time I put a post out there. What's your favorite movie? There's only 4 options I can put on there. Inevitably, somebody's gonna be like, "Why didn't you put Cyborg on there?" And I was like, "Bro,
My favorite part about Cyborg is the bad guy.
I haven't seen it."
He's just so dumb.
I haven't seen
Yeah,
Cyborg.
you'll have to watch it.
But this was like Jean-Claude Van Damme's pinnacle, and after this, his career kind of started to do.
Well,
like
this
a
is when
slow
he
slide.
developed that $10,000 a week cocaine habit,
Yeah.
and he had to just start churning out movies to support his habit.
But also, it was kind of like on the downswing of the action hero type thing, and I think the movie he did with Dennis Rodman. What was that one called?
Don't look at me. I don't know.
What movie
Double
is this?
Impact?
Was it Double Impact?
No, I'll look it up.
Like he did a movie with Dennis Rodman, and that was kind of like the nail in his coffin in terms of like
God, I can't imagine.
theatrical movies. This was like at Dennis Rodman's peak height of popularity.
Double Team.
Double Team, that's
Yeah.
what it was. Yeah, I can remember I actually saw that in the theater. It was terrible.